Hi friends, it's Miss Kim here, and I am going to be giving you your Science of Kentucky lesson via video for the next 2 weeks. So this one video will be for the next 2 weeks. So we're going to go over Kentucky snakes and learn some about some adaptations and some interesting facts about the different snakes. And then I am going to give you a research project that you will do as part of this. So that will cover this coming week and the week after that. So we talked a little bit last week about snakes and reptiles. We had just gotten into the reptiles that live in Kentucky. We had finished up learning about lizards and we had just started learning about snakes. So both snakes and lizards belong to an order called Squamata. And Squamata basically is just an order that encompasses the snakes and lizards, all snakes and lizards, not just the ones in Kentucky. Some of the adaptations that make snakes unique versus lizards and sort of set them apart from lizards, even though they are in the same order, is that snakes have no legs. That's probably the most obvious one. Snakes also have no ears. And the way that they sense vibrations and feel and smell is with their tongues. So you will often notice that snakes have a forked tongue for the most part. That fork in their tongue actually works to sort of trap chemicals that are in the air and allow them to sense when predators are around or when prey is around, things that they might want to eat. Snakes also have an adaptation that allows them to unhook their jaw. So basically taking where we have our jaw right here and unhinging that so that they can open their mouths really, really wide to be able to swallow animals that are much larger than their mouth would be. So if you've ever wondered how a snake swallows like a big rat or some other large animal, this is how they do that. Their bodies also are able to expand to digest those big animals as well. So snakes also get the reputation a lot of times, and this goes for lizards as well, which we talked about this a little bit if you remember. They are not slimy. So snakes and lizards have scales on them. If you feel of a snake or a lizard, you're not going to feel wetness or slime in any kind of sort. You're going to feel sort of a dry, rough, almost sandpaper-ish type of feel to them. The other animals that are slimy, that are sort of in that same kind of look as far as lizards go, remember, are the salamanders, which are amphibians, not reptiles, and they do have sort of a slimy kind of texture to their body. They do not have scales. They have smooth skin, which is slimy. But that shine comes from just these reflective scales that they have. So it is not in any way slime. Reptiles have many adaptations. Some of those we talked about are the not having legs, not having ears. But basically, reptiles evolved from an aquatic lifestyle millions and millions of years ago. So they really became very well adapted to surviving on land and to just surviving in general. So well adapted, in fact, that they actually evolved into these gigantic dinosaurs. But most modern reptiles have sort of experienced a reverse evolution, evolving back down to a smaller size to be able to survive. Our world does not allow for giant animals very much. And this is due to the fact of one thing that I talk about all the time. The number one rule in the animal kingdom is that animals do not exert energy unless it is needed, because energy is extremely hard to replenish. It's very costly to the animal to replenish. They have to replenish their energy by rest. They have to replenish their energy by food. These are things that are difficult when you're an animal trying to survive. So they're not going to just go expending energy. And the bigger you are, the more energy you have to expend. But the modern reptiles that we have, they tend to show a lot of the same adaptations. Aquatic reptiles are a little bit different. So we have sea turtles in that, and we have some aquatic turtles that live in freshwater. We have a lot of those here that live in Kentucky as well. Most of our turtle species, with the exception of one, are aquatic turtles. But even the aquatic reptiles still return to land for certain things, such as like laying their eggs. Reptiles are cold-blooded. They don't regulate their body temperatures the way that we do, which is we are able to regulate them internally. So reptiles have to regulate their body temperature from an outside source. So often when people in particular come across snakes or other reptiles, it's when they're in the process of doing just that. So when they're basking, laying out on like a rock or some other open surface in order to regulate and raise their body temperature. This is called being ectothermic, or more commonly cold-blooded. When animals that are cold-blooded feel sluggish or they feel cold, they need to bask in the sun to warm their bodies. This is one reason why you will see that reptiles sort of change their behavior, being nocturnal at certain times of the year and more out during the day at other times of year, because they also can get overheated very easily. So for a lot of times you will see that certain snakes, certain lizards become nocturnal during the very hottest part of the summer, and are more active during seasons like spring and fall, because they can actually get overheated very easily. And they will also regulate that as well by moving into burrows or moving into covered areas, going under rocks or under leafy areas to help regulate their body temperatures. So reptiles have a couple of different ways of reproducing. One of their big adaptations that sort of changed when they moved from being mostly aquatic animals to terrestrial animals is that they began laying eggs on land. So amphibians, which typically lay their eggs in wet areas or in the water, lay a very soft, gelatinous sort of mass of eggs. And for the most part use an external form of fertilization for those eggs. Those types of eggs will not survive in the kind of environment that snakes call home. So in these very dry, sort of arid environments that snakes like to live in, that kind of egg is going to dry out and not be viable. So instead, reptile eggs are actually very, very thick. They're leathery. They have like hard kind of calcium shell in some cases. And while they do often use internal fertilization to make those eggs viable, some reptiles actually deliver live babies. So it varies species to species. So you'll have some that have these very thick, sort of leathery eggs. They're not like chicken eggs or like a bird egg where they're hard, cracky on the outside. They're more of a soft sort of feel, but very, very thick. But some species of reptiles, some species of snakes have live babies and give birth to live snakes. So they still do have eggs. They just keep those eggs inside of them and keep the eggs safe inside their bodies until the snakes are ready to hatch. And then they give birth to the live snakes. And most species of snakes are basically very viable once they're born. So they don't require a lot of maternal care after that. And for the most part, they are sort of on their own as soon as they hatch. So the mothers will keep them safe while they're eggs, but after that, they're pretty much on their own, which means that they are also very vulnerable to predators in that state, because little tiny snakes make a great snack for birds. So with snakes wanting to sort of having a habit of living for the most part. There are some species that are semi-aquatic, but for the most part, snakes tend to kind of like a dry area. So they have developed these really thick, scaly skin, which helps them to conserve the moisture inside of their bodies. So this feature helps them to survive not just on land, but also in extremely dry places. We have many snakes here in Kentucky that live in forested areas and things like that, but there are a lot of snakes who prefer even more desert-like conditions, like out west and hotter conditions, and that adaptation of being able to kind of keep their moisture inside via those thick scales helps them to survive in those situations. The reptile's scales and skin are waterproof, and it's not really designed so much to keep water out as to keep the water in. Reptiles also have a very effective excretory system, so they try to remove as much moisture as possible before releasing waste. So this means that they have like a very highly concentrated urine because they don't really want to, they kind of save it up, I guess, if that makes sense, because they're trying not to expend any kind of moisture that they need to survive. So, so they are very efficient in that manner. Reptiles are not like amphibians in the way that they breathe. So for the most part, with some exceptions, amphibians use their breathe through their skin. There are some amphibians who have gills because they don't go past their larval state. There are also some amphibians that have developed lungs, so there's some room in that for different types of species. But reptiles all have lungs. So they use the lungs for breathing, and even the ones that live near water or are semi-aquatic, they still have to surface to breathe. So they are actually breathing using lungs. Lungs allow for these reptiles to live far away from water, to not have to rely on living in water or laying eggs near water or anything like that. Most reptiles are very similar to mammals in the fact that they have a pair of lungs, but there are some species that only have one lung that they use to breathe. In Kentucky, we have about 33 known species of snake. That number kind of varies back and forth sometimes because there are a few snakes that haven't been seen in a considerable amount of time in the state of Kentucky, and officials are sort of unsure if they ever were actually native to Kentucky or just sort of somebody saw them one time or they were released as pets or something like that. So, but 33 is the general number. So out of those 33 snakes, there are only 4 species of snake that are considered to be venomous. All of the other ones are harmless snakes. The type of venomous snake that we have here in Kentucky are part of a family called pit vipers. So pit vipers, the pit vipers that we have are the cottonmouth, which I should specify is the western cottonmouth, the copperhead, the timber rattlesnake, and the western pygmy rattlesnake. So the adaptations that these snakes have developed is to produce this venom that helps to do a couple of things. Kill their prey, and when they do kill their prey, it also helps them to digest their prey. It helps them to defend themselves against predators. And the venom is actually delivered via almost like an injection system. So they have often hollow grooved fangs of some sort that develop or help them to inject the venom. So if it's a hollow fang, it travels like almost just like a needle when you get a shot. If it's a grooved fang, it travels along that groove to be delivered to whoever or whatever they are biting. So venomous snakes sort of vary in their level of danger for us as human beings. There are a lot of factors involved. There are factors such as obviously the likelihood of whether that snake will bite or not, the efficiency of that bite, if they are a type of snake that is very efficient in delivering their venom to predators, and where, this is an important one, where that bite is located on a human being. Most bites on humans tend to occur on extremities, so particularly feet when people are unfortunate and step on a snake, or on hands when somebody is reaching into an area where a snake might be. Venomous snakes have two types of venom that they can deliver. There are snakes who deliver a neurotoxic venom, and there are snakes that deliver what is called a hemotoxic venom. Pit vipers, the type of venomous snake that we have here in Kentucky, are strictly hemotoxic deliverers. So hemotoxins basically are a toxin that works by attacking red blood cells. When it does that, it sort of disrupts our natural ability to have our blood clot the way that it's supposed to. And it can cause organ failure, and just in general tissue damage to the area, and where the bite is delivered, and also where the toxins travel. Hemotoxins are probably the most common type of toxin that's delivered by venomous animals. Vipers, pit vipers, and in general, most snakes deliver this type of venom. There are some snakes that do have the other type, the neurotoxic venom. Hemotoxic venom is particularly useful for snakes because the area that they deliver that bite, that toxin breaks down the proteins in that area, so it makes it more digestible for the snake. So based on that information, you can understand that snakes are not out there just attacking and biting things for no reason. The reason that they have this toxin, really, most reason, is to help them to eat. So they're not going to just be out there trying to bite you because they're not by any means going to be able to eat something as large as a human. So I wanted to talk first about the rattlesnakes that we have in Kentucky. So we have two kinds. I'm going to try to show you some pictures of the kind that we have here in Kentucky. This is you can see right here, the pygmy rattlesnake there. And we have the timber rattlesnake right here, timber rattlesnake. So rattlesnakes are like all pit vipers, and this is the reason why they are called pit vipers, in the fact that they have a pit, or it's like an indentation between their eye and their nostril on their face. And so what this pit does is basically a heat sensor. So it allows them to follow warm-blooded prey and detect them, particularly rodents, which tend to be the type of warm-blooded prey that a snake will be eating. They also eat insects and things like that, which are not warm-blooded. And this also helps them to detect predators that may be coming their way. The tip of the rattlesnake tongue is forked, like in a lot of snakes, and it allows them to smell particles that get attached in that fork, sort of caught in that fork when they're sensing the air. And they can actually smell what is happening using a special olfactory organ that they have. Rattlesnakes swallow their prey while their prey is still alive. And so they have a lot of additional teeth beyond the fangs that everybody is kind of familiar with inside their mouth to help them grasp and swallow that prey. Rattlesnakes So snakes sort of fall into two categories as far as coloring goes. One is to blend very closely with their environment, which is what rattlesnakes do as a camouflage to protect themselves. The other is to have very bright colors to sort of warn predators away from bothering them. But rattlesnakes fall into the very closely camouflage to their environment. It's often very difficult, and the different types of rattlesnakes have slightly different colorings depending on where they tend to live. It is very difficult to see a rattlesnake when they are blended with their environment, not moving. The rattlesnake's really cool adaptation is a special warning device that they have developed that is part of their tail. So, and where they get that name rattlesnake from. So the rattle is actually modified dry skin at the tip of their tail, and the rattle grows as the snake grows and sheds its skin. So a rattling noise is made when the snake takes and vibrates their tail to shake those rattles. And those rattles are actually like a hollow, bony sort of type of material that is made from these dry skin sheds. And they're sort of shaped almost like in donut-like segments on the tail. So when the snake rattles, they sort of hit against each other. When the snake vibrates its tail, they hit against each other and make this loud rattling sound. Rattlesnakes are like all venomous or non-venomous snakes in the fact that they don't really bite or strike for no reason. Their first line of defense against predators is going to warn them to go away. And they do that by using their rattle, or in other species of snakes being brightly colored, as I previously mentioned. They also will do their very best to just hide from predators. That's the easiest way to prevent being eaten, is to just hide. So this is why they're colored like their environment. Again, that number one rule of the animal kingdom is they have no reason to exert energy. They don't want to expel this venom. They don't want to bite you. They don't want to risk their safety for no reason. The next species of pit viper that we're going to talk about are copperheads. So copperheads tend to be a little bit more common around this area than rattlesnakes. So copperheads have adapted to camouflage extremely well with their surroundings. They're typically found in areas that have like a red clay soil, or hanging around in areas with dry leaves, and their coloring matches those areas really well. It's nearly impossible to see a copperhead that is lying still in a camouflaged area. So that causes a problem sometimes with human interaction. They do not want to bite you, and if possible, they are going to flee the area if they sense you coming. So they also, and a lot of pit vipers do this, will rattle their tail or vibrate their tail as a warning. Now, they don't have the rattle, so it's not necessarily making a loud noise, but it is a rattling of their tail up in the air as kind of a symbol when you're getting too close, of like, you need to back off. Most bites on humans by copperheads occur because copperheads, once you get too close and like their warning signs have not deterred you in any way, they sort of freeze in place as a protective device for themselves. Why that tends to occur in bites is because copperheads don't bite unless contact has been made. So once a person accidentally steps on or reaches their hand into an area where the copperhead is, and the copperhead has frozen, and they maybe touch the copperhead, that is when the bite is going to happen. So you see that the circumstances have to be very specific for this to happen. Also, copperheads tend to be nocturnal in the summer. They don't like it when it's really, really super, super hot. So when people are often out like hiking and enjoying the outdoors, the copperheads are usually hiding and not anywhere to be found. Now, they are pretty active during the day during the spring and the fall. So those are the times particularly spring and fall when we have a lot of leaf litter still on the ground, that they are out and about and may be hard to detect. So it's always a good idea if you're walking into an area that has a heavy covering of this like leaf litter or debris to sort of like maybe, you know, make your appearance known, sort of, especially maybe if you have a stick or something you can kind of poke around in before you go into that area. Copperheads also have another cool adaptation when they're juveniles, which is actually a lure adaptation to attract prey, particularly like frogs and insects. So the juvenile copperhead actually has a very brightly colored tail, and it kind of mimics looking like something that the frogs or insects might want to have a snack on. Copperheads are mostly a terrestrial snake, meaning that they spend the majority of their time on the ground. However, they love to eat cicadas. And when we have a big emergence of cicadas, they have been known to climb trees in order to feast on those cicadas. The last venomous type of snake. Oh, and I wanted to show you the copperhead real quick, what they look like. So copperheads tend to have this sort of a coppery type of color to them, which is where they get that name from, and you can see how they would blend very closely with the leaf litter on the ground. So the last type of venomous snake that we have here in Kentucky that we're going to talk about is a semi-aquatic type of snake. And this guy right here is the cottonmouth. So the cottonmouth is unique in the fact that it is the world's only semi-aquatic pit viper. It's usually found in or near a water area, particularly like slow-moving water, such as lakes and ponds, streams, marshes, those kinds of things. It is a very strong swimmer, even though it prefers that sort of slow-moving water. And there have actually been sightings of copperheads actually in the ocean. They have set up. There are cottonmouth populations on some islands, so we definitely know that they are able to swim over those distances, even though it might not be their favorite thing to do. So the cottonmouth in Kentucky is often called, you will hear it called, a water moccasin. And that is the same snake. So that's one thing to know. Water moccasins and cottonmouths are the same snake. The name cottonmouth actually comes from a very unique adaptation, which you can kind of see in this picture right here that I showed you. When they are startled, cottonmouths are a little bit different from other pit vipers. So they will, about 60% of the time, they will choose to stay on their ground. And when they do that, they coil their bodies up and they open that mouth really, really wide. And the inside of that mouth is white. And it is a stark difference to the color of their very dark bodies. And that is a sign to their predators to go away, because they want to let the predators know that they are dangerous and that they will bite them. So if you ever see a snake doing that, you need to go the other direction. They still won't bite unless contact is made. So that is a warning sign for you to stop, walk away, but they're not going to bite you unless you make some sort of contact or continue on threatening them. They also emit a loud hiss, and do the tail vibration thing, the waving of the tail to let you know to go away. They also have an adaptation that they emit a very strong, stinky smell from a gland at the base of their tail. It's got a very musky smell, and they can actually make streams of it as another warning sign. So they're giving you plenty of warnings to move along and not bother them. I wanted to talk a little bit about why we say venomous versus poisonous when we are talking about snakes. Venom is something that is injected via either a bite or a sting by an animal. Poison means that you must actually ingest that animal in order to receive the toxins. So very, very few species of snakes are actually poisonous. And for the most part, especially here in America, we don't do a lot of eating of snakes. So most of the snakes that we're talking about, the concern is the venom. The